Hello, everyone. Welcome to Reflecting on Truth. I'm Jim Higgins. Today, I want to talk about one of the greatest opportunities that is being presented to the Christian church in quite a few generations. I hope you'll stay with me as I talk about this and some things that I think we can do that will literally change the world for Jesus Christ. For the last several generations, at least in the United States of America, the government has been increasingly taking on the roles that have traditionally been served by the church. Increasingly, the government has been providing those services that provide food, that provide social support, that provide clothing, that provide a whole array of supports. And as the government has taken on this increasing role, the church has increasingly receded into the background to the point, whereas the philosopher commentator Os Guinness described it, the church has become privately engaging, but publicly irrelevant. I'm going to do a totally different video on this comment or this idea at some later point. But I think it's important to note that there are a great many people who find their spiritual life to be privately engaging, but when it translates into public action, it really is publicly irrelevant. As the government has stepped into these roles, religion has been increasingly pressed out of the public sphere into the private sphere. And so whereas the church used to have so many charitable organizations, organizations that provide food to the hungry, that provide clothing, that provide healthcare, all of these have pretty much disappeared from the public arena, and the church is left primarily to deal with people's spiritual needs. Now, this is very different from the model that Jesus followed as he was on this earth. In Jesus's ministry, very often he began with meeting people's physical needs of healing, of support, of forgiveness, of food, all of these things. And by demonstrating the love of God in an active and profound way, people were much more willing to listen to what he said about eternal values. As the public sphere, the government has taken on these roles, the church has become weaker and enfeebled and retreated back into the sidelines of society. Well, since the last election in the United States, the federal government is increasingly retreating from providing these services which people really need. Now, I'm not here to comment on whether this is a good thing or a bad thing. Personally, I'm not all that interested in politics because from my perspective, God is not a member of a political party. And last I heard, Jesus said his kingdom is not of this world, or his people would fight for this world. Instead, I am interested in the eternal world, which the Bible tells us is fast approaching. And this world will wear out and wax old like a garment until one day it ceases to exist. So the opportunity that I'm talking about is that as the government retreats from providing services, for example, I read in the New York Times just the other day that the federal government was withholding money that would go to the schools, public schools, for after-school programs, for supporting English as a second language learners, things like that. We also know that the government is cutting back on health benefits for some people. Here's the opportunity that I think is being presented to the church that will allow us to be relevant in ways that we have not been relevant for generations. What am I talking about? I'm talking about Christians stepping into the void to live lives of active love. In other words, putting our money and our time and our actions where our mouths have so often been. We've talked about God being love, and we've talked about his love for us and how we as Christians should love others. But my question is, where is the practical impact of that in our culture today? What are we doing as Christians to live out an example of Christ's love to the world? How are people who don't know God going to come to the recognition that God truly is love if his people don't reflect that love to them in practical ways, just like Jesus did? So here's the opportunity. I want to encourage you in your congregation. If your congregation isn't willing to do it, try to get together an army of the willing to do it and put together practical ministries to support those people who will increasingly be in need in our communities. As the SNAP program, the Supplemental Nutritional Aid Program, is what I think it's called, is that gets cut from the federal government and states receive less funding, there's going to be shortfalls. So what are we going to do as Christians? I recommend that we revisit the idea of creating food pantries. I know some churches still do this, but there are a great number of churches, some that I have attended as well, who have phased that out. Bring that back to provide food for the needy. There are people who will have less money available for clothes. Bring back a community services program that provides clothing to those people who don't have it. For as an example, with the federal government, if they cut back funding to providing training for people who are learning English, put together programs at your local church where you can help people learn English so that they can participate in the society in a vital way and thus improve their quality of life. There's this whole array of ministries that can be encouraged and developed so that we can step into the gap that's being left by the government. Now, this same thing has happened in Europe. Europe has had a social safety net that's been an envy of the world. Healthcare is free, all of these things are free, but the reality of it is, while those things have been traditionally very effective in Europe, they come at a significant price tag of high taxes. And as countries are facing increasing deficits, those governments also are going to find the need to retrench, especially if I'm just looking at the European countries as the United States is requiring them to pay more money for defense. Well, that money has to come from somewhere. And some of that is likely to be in safety nets, and people are going to be upset about that. And I think rightly so in some ways. I mean, you've come to count on a benefit. We as Christians should be less interested in whether the government is funding these things. To me, this is an opportunity, because if we as Christians can implement these programs that will step into that void and that we will feed the hungry, clothe the naked, help provide health care for those who need it. Like there are doctors who will volunteer to do dental clinics and medical screening clinics and things like that. Set that up in your local community, and you will suddenly demonstrate that the Christian church is a vital actor on the world stage. That we're not just religious in the private sphere of our own homes, but rather we are active participants in the world, making a difference in everyday people's lives. I want to conclude with the parable that I've shared before in a number of my talks that I've given here on YouTube, from the book of Matthew in the New Testament, chapter 25, where Jesus is talking about the end of time. And he's comparing two groups of religious people. And he compares them to sheep and to goats. So I want to spend a little time just reading this to you, and I want to talk about how this fits in with this opportunity that I've just described. So in Matthew chapter 25, verse 31, Jesus says, "When the Son of Man comes," in other words, we're talking about the end of the world here. "When the Son of Man comes in his glory, and all the angels are with him, he will sit on his glorious throne. and all the nations will be gathered before him, and he will separate people one from another as a shepherd separates sheep from goats. And he's going to put the sheep on his right-hand side, and the goats he's going to put on his left-hand side. Now, I want you to pay attention to what I'm about to read. In verse 34, Jesus says, "Then the king will say to those on his right, the sheep, 'Come, you who are blessed by my Father, take your inheritance, the kingdom prepared for you since the creation of the world.'" Listen to this. "For I was hungry, and you gave me something to eat. I was thirsty, and you gave me something to drink. I was a stranger, and you invited me in. I needed clothes, and you clothed me. I was sick, and you looked after me. I was in prison, and you came to visit me." Notice the practical, tangible things that Jesus is saying describe those followers who will inherit the kingdom of God prepared from the foundation of the world. Now, it's interesting the reactions of these people whom Jesus is designating as sheep. He says, "The righteous will then answer him, 'Lord, when did we see you hungry and feed you, or thirsty and give you something to drink? When did we see you a stranger and invite you in, or needing clothes and clothe you? When did we see you sick or in prison and go to visit you?' And the king will reply, 'Truly I tell you, whatever you did to one of the least of these brothers and sisters of mine, you did to me.'" So do you see the opportunity that I'm describing? For so long now, people have looked to the government to provide all of these basic services, all of these basic needs. And I'm afraid that we as Christians have maybe relied too heavily on the idea that I pay my taxes, I'm supporting these ministries. Jesus is talking about something very personal. It's a personal interaction between his followers and those who are in need. And as the government retrenches from providing these services, this is like a once in a lifetime, literally lately, as things have stood lately, this is like a once in a lifetime opportunity when the church can step forward and make a difference of such a magnitude that people will look at us, as the Bible describes the apostles, and say, "These people have been with Jesus." And they'll look at us and say, "If this is what following Jesus is like, I want to be a part of it," because they see the relevance. Rather than being privately engaging and publicly irrelevant, we can be privately devoted and publicly relevant and make the difference that Jesus called on us to make. Now, just briefly, you'll notice as that parable continues, he then talks about the goats. And I won't read this, but if you want to read it, you can go ahead and find it. Verse 41, that those on his left, he'll say, "Depart from me, for I never knew you." And he's going to point out to them that the reason that he never knew them is because they failed to take personal action to meet these needs. Well, when the government's meeting all the needs, it's kind of hard to step in and meet those important needs. But now we have this opportunity. And I want to encourage you as an individual believer, but also in your local congregation and in broader church organizations. This is our opportunity to shine. Let's step in and show what the love of Jesus is all about. Let's shine a light on our community that cannot be ignored. It's up to us to do it prayerfully, devotedly, humbly, to follow the command of our Lord to love others as he has loved us. So this is Reflecting on Truth, and I am Jim Higgins. I appreciate your time. If you find this content compelling or useful, I'd encourage you to subscribe or share this content with someone else. If you also click the like button, it tells me that what I have done, what I'm doing is useful and is meeting someone's needs. Also, if you have any ideas about how the church can step up at this time to be relevant and compelling, winning people to the love of Christ, would you please comment below? I would love to hear that, and there may be others who would like to see it as well. Thank you for your time. Have a lovely day.